The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the Metropolitan Charity Gala, as Margaret Chen adjusted the modest black dress she had borrowed from her neighbor for the evening. She had worked for 3 months cleaning offices downtown just to afford the $500 ticket to this exclusive fundraising event, knowing that tonight would mark the beginning of the most important chapter of her life. What the wealthy attendees swirling around her in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos didn't know was that the woman they would soon mistake for hired help was actually the anonymous benefactor who had been quietly supporting their favorite charities for the past 5 years through her technology company, Innovate Tech Solutions. Hi, beautiful souls. This is Tina, and I'm so grateful you're here with me today because what I'm about to share with you is one of the most powerful stories of hidden strength and divine justice that I've ever encountered. Tonight, we're going to witness how assumptions about people based on their appearance can lead to the most spectacular revelations. And trust me when I tell you that what happens at this charity gala will restore your faith in the power of quiet dignity and authentic generosity. You're going to see how Margaret turns a night of humiliation into a moment of such profound impact that it changes not just her own life, but the lives of everyone who thought they knew better than to look beyond the surface. This story has twists that will leave you speechless, and an ending that proves that real power often comes dressed in the most unexpected packages. If stories like this touch your heart the way they touch mine, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to join our family, because together we're building a community that celebrates the triumph of the human spirit in all its beautiful forms. Margaret had built Innovate Tech from nothing more than a brilliant idea and a determination to prove that innovation could come from the most unlikely places, growing the company from her tiny studio apartment into a multi-million-dollar enterprise that developed software solutions for major corporations across the United States. She had deliberately kept her identity as the company's founder and CEO completely private, operating through carefully chosen representatives and legal structures that allowed her to maintain the anonymity she craved while building something extraordinary. The decision to remain hidden had been both strategic and personal, stemming from her childhood experiences as the daughter of Chinese immigrants who had worked multiple jobs to provide for their family, teaching Margaret that real success was measured by what you accomplished rather than how much recognition you received for your efforts. The irony of tonight's situation wasn't lost on Margaret as she observed the elaborate displays of wealth and status surrounding her in the grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. These same people, whose organizations had benefited from her anonymous donations over the years, were now looking at her with the kind of dismissive glances reserved for those they considered beneath their social standing. Completely unaware that the quiet woman in the simple black dress had contributed more to their causes than most of them would earn in their entire lifetimes. Margaret had donated over $4 million to various charities represented at tonight's gala, always through untraceable channels that protected her privacy while ensuring that the money reached the people and organizations that needed it most. The evening had started promisingly enough, with Margaret genuinely excited to finally attend one of these events and see firsthand how the organizations she supported operated and connected with their donors. She had imagined meeting like-minded individuals who shared her passion for making a difference in the world, perhaps even finding opportunities to expand her philanthropic efforts through new partnerships and collaborations. The reality, however, had been far different from her expectations, as she quickly discovered that the focus seemed to be more on social networking and status display than on the actual charitable work being celebrated tonight. Margaret's first uncomfortable encounter had occurred at the registration table, where the volunteer checking her in had looked at her modest appearance with barely concealed confusion before asking multiple times if she was certain she was supposed to be attending the main gala rather than one of the staff orientation sessions being held in the lower level of the hotel. The volunteer's tone had been polite but condescending, making it clear that Margaret's presence among the evening's distinguished guests was unexpected and potentially inappropriate. Margaret had handled the situation with grace, simply presenting her invitation and identification while maintaining the dignified composure that had served her well throughout her business career. The pattern had continued throughout the cocktail hour as Margaret attempted to engage in conversations with other attendees, only to find herself repeatedly mistaken for hired help or subjected to the kind of dismissive treatment that revealed just how much these supposedly charitable individuals judged others based on superficial appearances. One particularly memorable interaction had involved a woman wearing what appeared to be $50,000 worth of jewelry, asking Margaret if she could direct her to the ladies' room, apparently assuming that anyone dressed as modestly as Margaret must be working the event rather than attending as a guest. Margaret had spent years building her company while maintaining a deliberately low profile, preferring to let her work speak for itself rather than seeking the kind of public recognition that seemed to drive so many of her peers in the technology industry. This approach had allowed her to focus entirely on innovation and growth, while avoiding the distractions and complications that came with celebrity status in the business world. She had grown accustomed to being underestimated and overlooked, using these experiences as motivation to prove that substance mattered more than style, and that real achievement could flourish without the need for constant validation or attention from others. The charity gala represented Margaret's first attempt to step slightly out of the shadows and connect more directly with the causes she had been supporting anonymously for years, hoping to find ways to make her philanthropy even more effective and impactful. She had carefully researched each organization represented at tonight's event, understanding their missions, their leadership, and their track records in addressing the social issues that mattered most to her. Margaret's anonymous donations had already helped fund scholarships for underprivileged students, support research into renewable energy technologies, and provide resources for women's shelters throughout the metropolitan area. The evening took a decidedly uncomfortable turn when Margaret approached the silent auction display, genuinely interested in bidding on several items that would support causes close to her heart, particularly a week-long retreat donation that would fund technology training programs for unemployed women seeking to rebuild their careers. As she carefully examined the auction sheets and considered her bidding strategy, she became aware of whispered conversations happening around her, with several attendees speculating about her presence and making assumptions about her financial circumstances that were both insulting and completely inaccurate. Margaret overheard one particularly well-dressed couple discussing her appearance in hushed tones, with the woman commenting that it was inappropriate for someone obviously struggling financially to attend such an expensive event when the money could have been better spent on necessities. The man responded by suggesting that Margaret was probably attending on some kind of charity scholarship or community outreach program designed to make the wealthy attendees feel better about their own privileged circumstances. Their conversation revealed a level of casual cruelty and assumptions about class and worth that shocked Margaret, who had dedicated her adult life to creating opportunities for people from all backgrounds to succeed and thrive. The couple's speculation continued as they debated whether Margaret was perhaps a social worker or community organizer who had been invited to provide perspective on the charitable organizations being supported tonight, with the woman expressing concern that Margaret's presence might make other guests uncomfortable or feel guilty about their own wealth and lifestyle choices. Margaret listened to this conversation with growing amazement at the disconnect between these people's stated commitment to helping others and their actual attitudes toward anyone who didn't fit their narrow definition of appropriate social standing. The irony was particularly striking, given that Margaret's anonymous donations had likely contributed to several of the projects these same people were proudly supporting tonight. Margaret's resolve to maintain her dignity and composure was tested even further when she approached the buffet table for dinner, only to have one of the event organizers mistake her for catering staff and ask her to help clear some of the empty plates from nearby tables. The request was made with the kind of automatic assumption that revealed how completely the organizer had categorized Margaret based solely on her appearance, without any consideration that she might actually be one of the evening's paying guests. Margaret politely corrected the misunderstanding, explaining that she was attending as a guest rather than working the event. But the interaction left her feeling increasingly isolated and frustrated with the superficial judgments that seemed to dominate these social gatherings. The situation escalated during the formal dinner portion of the evening, when Margaret found herself seated at a table with several prominent business leaders and their spouses. all of whom seemed determined to either ignore her presence entirely or engage her in conversations that revealed their assumptions about her background and circumstances. One particularly condescending woman spent several minutes explaining the purpose of the various charitable organizations being honored tonight, apparently believing that Margaret needed education about philanthropy and social responsibility, despite having contributed more to these causes than anyone else at the table. Margaret found herself in the surreal position of listening to detailed explanations about organizations she had been quietly supporting for years, while the person providing these explanations clearly assumed that Margaret had never encountered serious charitable work or understood the importance of giving back to the community. The woman's tone was patronizing and educational, as if she were speaking to someone who needed guidance about basic social responsibility rather than someone who had been living these principles through concrete action for years. The conversation at Margaret's table revealed the complex dynamics of wealth, status, and charitable giving that characterize these elite social circles, with various attendees competing to demonstrate their knowledge of social issues and their commitment to making a difference in the world. Margaret observed how the discussion focused heavily on the social aspects of philanthropy rather than the actual impact of their giving, with considerable attention paid to which events people attended, which organizations provided the best networking opportunities, and which charitable activities offered the most prestigious recognition for donors. Hey there, beautiful hearts. I need to pause here for just a moment because I can feel how this story is affecting you. And I know so many of you watching have experienced similar moments when people made assumptions about your worth based on how you looked or what you were wearing. I'm so grateful that you're here with me, sharing in these powerful stories that remind us that true value isn't measured by designer clothes or expensive jewelry, but by the content of our character and the love we bring to the world. Your presence here means everything to me, and I hope you'll take a moment to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Because we're building something special together, a community that sees beyond the surface and celebrates the hidden heroes walking among us every day. Please share in the comments about times when you've been underestimated or when someone surprised you with their hidden depths, because your stories help me choose the content that matters most and create this beautiful space where we can all feel seen and valued for who we truly are. Margaret's patience began to wear thin as the evening progressed, and the pattern of condescending treatment continued from multiple directions, with various attendees making comments or assumptions that revealed their narrow understanding of worth and success. She watched as people who claimed to care about helping others demonstrated remarkable insensitivity towards someone they perceived as being from a different social class, showing Margaret just how superficial much of this charitable activity really was for many of the participants. The breaking point approached when Margaret attempted to participate in a conversation about technology innovation and its potential for solving social problems, only to have her insights dismissed or ignored by people who assumed that someone dressed as modestly as she was couldn't possibly understand complex business or technological concepts. Margaret found herself in the bizarre position of having her own expertise questioned by people who had no idea they were speaking to one of the most successful technology entrepreneurs in the region, someone whose innovations had revolutionized entire industries while creating thousands of jobs and generating millions in economic activity. The most humiliating moment of the evening arrived during the live auction portion of the gala, when auctioneer Jonathan Pierce called for bids on a luxury vacation package that would support educational programs for underprivileged children. Margaret raised her hand to bid $25,000, genuinely wanting to support the cause while also testing how the room would react to her participation in the high-stakes bidding that characterized these events. The response was immediate and mortifying, with audible gasps and murmurs rippling through the ballroom as attendees turned to stare at the woman who had dared to enter their exclusive financial territory. Pierce himself seemed uncertain about how to handle Margaret's bid, pausing awkwardly before asking if she was certain she understood the amount being discussed and whether she had the means to fulfill such a substantial financial commitment. His tone carried the same patronizing quality that had characterized most of Margaret's interactions throughout the evening, revealing his assumption that someone of her apparent social standing couldn't possibly be serious about making such a significant donation. The question was asked publicly in front of hundreds of attendees, making Margaret's position even more uncomfortable and highlighting the class divisions that seemed to define these supposedly inclusive charitable events. Margaret confirmed her bid with quiet dignity, maintaining her composure despite the obvious discomfort her participation was causing among the other guests, many of whom seemed genuinely shocked that someone they had dismissed as inappropriate for the event was prepared to make financial contributions that exceeded their own charitable giving. The bidding continued with other participants, but Margaret noticed that the atmosphere in the room had shifted noticeably, with many conversations now focused on speculation about her identity and her ability to follow through on such a substantial financial commitment. The whispered speculation about Margaret intensified throughout the remainder of the auction, with various attendees developing increasingly elaborate theories about who she might be and how she could possibly afford to participate in bidding at such high levels. Some suggested she might be representing a wealthy employer or organization, while others wondered if she was perhaps a journalist or social activist attempting to make some kind of political statement about wealth inequality and charitable giving. The most cruel speculation involved suggestions that Margaret was somehow attempting to defraud the organization or gain attention through false bidding, assumptions that revealed the depths of prejudice and suspicion that could emerge when people's expectations about social hierarchy were challenged. Margaret's successful bid on the vacation package was followed by an even more uncomfortable interaction with Pierce, who approached her during a break in the auction to quietly suggest that she might want to reconsider her commitment given the substantial financial obligation involved. His concern was presented as helpfulness, but Margaret recognized it as another example of the condescending attitude that had characterized the entire evening, with supposedly charitable people demonstrating remarkable insensitivity towards someone they perceived as being out of place in their exclusive social circle. The conversation with Pierce revealed additional layers of assumption and prejudice as he explained the payment procedures and requirements in unnecessary detail, apparently believing that Margaret needed extensive guidance about financial transactions and charitable giving protocols. He emphasized the tax implications and legal obligations associated with such large donations, speaking as if Margaret had never encountered serious financial decisions or understood the complexities of philanthropic giving. The irony was particularly painful, given that Margaret had been making anonymous donations far larger than this auction bid for years, with a sophisticated understanding of charitable giving strategies that exceeded Pierce's own knowledge. Margaret's response to Pierce was measured and professional, confirming her commitment to the bid while maintaining the dignified composure that had served her throughout the evening's challenges. She provided the necessary financial information and documentation without elaborating on her background or attempting to correct the assumptions that had been made about her circumstances. Margaret had learned over the years that proving herself to people who had already made judgments based on superficial observations was often futile, and she preferred to let her actions speak for themselves rather than engaging in defensive explanations. The remainder of the auction proceeded with Margaret participating in several additional rounds of bidding, ultimately winning 3 different items with a combined value of over $60,000 in charitable contributions. Each successful bid generated more whispered speculation and uncomfortable reactions from other attendees, who seemed increasingly puzzled by the quiet woman who was outbidding established philanthropists and society figures with apparent ease. Margaret observed their confusion with a mixture of sadness and determination, knowing that the evening was building toward a revelation that would challenge everything these people believed about worth, success, and the nature of true charitable giving. As the formal auction concluded and the evening moved toward its closing ceremonies, Margaret made a decision that would transform not only her own relationship with philanthropy, but also the understanding of everyone present about the nature of generosity and the dangers of judging others based on superficial appearances. She had originally planned to maintain her anonymity indefinitely, continuing her charitable work behind the scenes while avoiding the complications and attention that came with public recognition. However, the treatment she had received throughout the evening had convinced her that remaining silent would only enable the kind of prejudice and superficial thinking that had made her feel so unwelcome among people who claimed to share her values. Margaret approached the registration table where she had experienced her first uncomfortable interaction of the evening, requesting a private meeting with the event's organizing committee to discuss a substantial additional donation that would require immediate attention and coordination. The volunteer who had originally questioned Margaret's presence at the event seemed confused by this request, apparently uncertain about whether someone of Margaret's apparent social standing should be taken seriously when discussing major financial contributions. However, the mention of a significant donation was enough to prompt the volunteer to contact the event organizers, setting in motion a sequence of events that would reveal the true nature of generosity and challenge every assumption that had been made about Margaret throughout the evening. The private meeting that followed brought together Margaret and the event's 3 primary organizers in a small conference room adjacent to the main ballroom, where the sounds of continued celebration provided a surreal backdrop to the conversation that was about to unfold. Committee Chairwoman Patricia Whitman entered the room with the same condescending smile that had characterized most of Margaret's interactions throughout the evening, clearly expecting to handle what she assumed would be a minor donation request or perhaps a complaint about some aspect of the event's organization. The other 2 organizers, Robert Chen and Sarah Martinez, seemed equally prepared for a routine conversation with someone they had categorized as a well-meaning but ultimately insignificant participant in their exclusive charitable gathering. Margaret began the conversation by thanking the organizers for their work in coordinating the evening's events and for their dedication to the various charitable causes being supported through the gala's fundraising efforts. Her tone was gracious and appreciative, revealing none of the frustration or hurt she had experienced throughout the evening's series of humiliating encounters. She explained that she had been deeply moved by the presentations about the organizations being honored tonight and wanted to make an additional contribution that would significantly impact their ability to continue and expand their important work in the community. Whitman's response revealed the same pattern of assumption and condescension that had characterized Margaret's entire evening, with the committee chairwoman explaining in unnecessary detail how charitable donations worked and what kind of financial commitment would be meaningful for the organizations represented at tonight's event. She suggested that Margaret might want to consider a modest monthly pledge rather than attempting to make a large one-time donation, apparently assuming that someone of Margaret's apparent financial circumstances would be better served by spreading smaller contributions over an extended period rather than making the kind of substantial gift that could have immediate impact. Margaret listened patiently to this explanation while observing the dynamics between the 3 organizers, noting how their body language and facial expressions revealed their shared assumption that this meeting was essentially a formality that would conclude with a small donation and expressions of gratitude for Margaret's modest participation in their important work. She could see that they were already mentally moving on to other responsibilities and social obligations, treating her request for a private meeting as an unnecessary interruption in their evening's networking and celebration activities. The atmosphere in the room shifted dramatically when Margaret quietly announced that she wanted to make an immediate donation of $1 million to be distributed equally among the 5 charitable organizations being honored at tonight's gala, with the donation to be made in the names of the 3 organizers as recognition for their dedication to these important causes. The silence that followed her announcement was profound and uncomfortable, with all 3 organizers staring at Margaret in complete disbelief as they struggled to process what they had just heard from the woman they had dismissed and condescended to throughout the entire evening. Whitman was the first to break the silence, asking Margaret to repeat her statement because she was certain she must have misunderstood the amount being discussed. When Margaret confirmed that she was indeed proposing to donate $1 million immediately, Whitman's expression shifted from confusion to suspicion as she questioned whether Margaret truly understood the magnitude of such a financial commitment and whether she possessed the means to fulfill such an extraordinary pledge. The questioning revealed the same patronizing attitude that had characterized the evening's interactions, with Whitman apparently unable to accept that someone she had judged as financially insignificant could be serious about making such a substantial contribution. Margaret's response was calm and professional as she explained that she was prepared to transfer the full amount immediately through electronic banking systems, providing the necessary account information and documentation to facilitate the transaction within the next few minutes. She offered to contact her financial advisors and banking representatives to expedite the process, making it clear that this was not an impulsive gesture or empty promise, but rather a carefully considered decision backed by readily available resources. The organizers exchanged glances of bewilderment as they realized that the woman they had treated with such casual dismissiveness was apparently capable of making the largest single donation in the gala's 20-year history. Chen finally found his voice to ask Margaret about her background and the source of her apparent wealth, clearly struggling to reconcile the modest appearance and quiet demeanor he had observed throughout the evening with the extraordinary financial capacity she was now demonstrating. Margaret's response was measured and informative as she explained that she was the founder and CEO of Innovate Tech Solutions, a technology company that had grown from a small startup into a major player in the software development industry over the past decade. She described her company's success in creating innovative solutions for corporate clients while maintaining a deliberately low public profile that had allowed her to focus on business growth rather than personal recognition. The revelation of Margaret's true identity and professional achievements created an even more profound shift in the room's atmosphere as the three organizers realized they had spent the entire evening treating one of the region's most successful entrepreneurs with the kind of dismissive condescension typically reserved for people they considered socially or financially inferior. Martinez appeared visibly embarrassed as she recalled her own interactions with Margaret throughout the evening, particularly her detailed explanations about charitable giving to someone who had apparently been supporting these same organizations anonymously for years through substantial financial contributions. Margaret continued her explanation by revealing that she had been making anonymous donations to various charitable organizations for the past 5 years, contributing over $4 million to causes throughout the metropolitan area while maintaining complete privacy about her philanthropic activities. She explained that tonight's gala had represented her first attempt to engage more directly with the charitable community, hoping to find opportunities for increased collaboration and more effective giving strategies. However, the treatment she had received throughout the evening had convinced her that a more dramatic demonstration was necessary to address the prejudices and assumptions that seemed to characterize these supposedly inclusive charitable gatherings. The impact of Margaret's revelation extended far beyond the immediate shock experienced by the three organizers as word of the unprecedented donation began to spread throughout the ballroom, creating ripples of amazement and uncomfortable self-reflection among the attendees who had spent the evening dismissing and condescending to the woman who had just made the largest charitable contribution in the event's history. Margaret had requested that the organizers announce the donation immediately, explaining that she wanted the evening's participants to understand the connection between their treatment of her and the extraordinary generosity they were about to witness from someone they had judged unworthy of their respect or consideration. Whitman's announcement to the assembled guests created a moment of profound silence, followed by confused murmuring, as attendees struggled to process the information they were hearing about the quiet woman many of them had barely noticed or had actively dismissed throughout the evening. The announcement explained that an anonymous benefactor had just made a $1 million donation to be distributed equally among the 5 featured charitable organizations, and that this same individual had been supporting these causes quietly for years through substantial financial contributions that had enabled much of the important work being celebrated tonight. The atmosphere in the ballroom shifted dramatically as people began to realize that their assumptions about worth and success had been spectacularly wrong, and that the woman they had treated with casual dismissiveness was actually the most generous contributor present at the evening's festivities. Margaret observed these reactions with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness, knowing that her demonstration had achieved its intended impact, while also revealing the shallow nature of much of the charitable activity that characterized these elite social gatherings. She could see attendees frantically trying to remember their interactions with her throughout the evening, many of them clearly uncomfortable as they recalled their own behavior and assumptions. The organizers' decision to reveal Margaret's identity as the evening's most significant donor created additional waves of shock and embarrassment as people realized that the technology entrepreneur they had ignored or condescended to was actually someone whose professional achievements far exceeded their own accomplishments in business and philanthropy. The revelation forced many attendees to confront their own prejudices about appearance, social status, and the nature of success, creating an uncomfortable but necessary moment of self-reflection about the values that guided their interactions with others. Margaret's brief remarks to the assembled guests were gracious and educational rather than accusatory, focusing on the importance of looking beyond superficial appearances to recognize the worth and potential contributions of all individuals. She spoke about her own journey from struggling immigrant family to successful entrepreneur, emphasizing how the support and encouragement of others had been crucial to her achievements, while noting that judgment and dismissiveness could prevent people from recognizing and nurturing hidden talents and capabilities. Her speech was received with respectful silence as attendees absorbed the implications of her message and reflected on their own behavior throughout the evening. The response from individual attendees varied dramatically as people processed the evening's revelations and their own roles in the uncomfortable dynamics that had characterized Margaret's experience at the gala. Some approached her with genuine apologies and expressions of embarrassment about their assumptions and behavior, while others seemed primarily focused on networking opportunities and attempting to establish connections with someone they now recognized as a significant figure in the business and philanthropic communities. Margaret handled these interactions with characteristic grace, accepting apologies while maintaining appropriate boundaries about future relationships and collaborations. The most meaningful responses came from attendees who used Margaret's demonstration as an opportunity for genuine self-reflection about their own values and behavior, acknowledging that the evening had revealed uncomfortable truths about their assumptions and prejudices that needed to be addressed through concrete changes in how they approached charitable work and social interactions. These conversations gave Margaret hope that her dramatic revelation might lead to positive changes in how these charitable organizations operated and how their supporters engaged with people from different backgrounds and circumstances. My beautiful, beautiful souls, I have to pause here because I can feel the emotion building in this incredible story, and I know so many of you are thinking about times when you've been underestimated or when you've maybe caught yourself making assumptions about others based on how they looked or dressed. I'm so grateful that you're here with me, sharing in these powerful moments that remind us that true worth has nothing to do with designer clothes or expensive accessories, but everything to do with the love we carry in our hearts and the kindness we show to others. Your presence here creates this beautiful space where we can all learn and grow together, and I hope you'll take a moment to subscribe if you haven't already, because we're building something special, a community that sees beyond the surface and celebrates the hidden heroes walking among us every day. Please share in the comments about times when someone surprised you with their hidden depths, or when you learned not to judge a book by its cover, because your stories inspire me to keep bringing you content that matters and helps us all become more loving, more understanding people. Thank you for being part of this journey with me. The long-term impact of Margaret's revelation extended far beyond the immediate shock and embarrassment experienced by the evening's attendees, creating lasting changes in how the featured charitable organizations approach their fundraising events and donor relationships. Several organizations implemented new policies designed to ensure that all guests were treated with equal respect and dignity regardless of their appearance or perceived social status, recognizing that hidden benefactors and potential major donors might not always fit traditional expectations about wealth and philanthropy. Margaret's decision to make her donation in the names of the three organizers created an additional layer of complexity and learning opportunity, as Whitman, Chen, and Martinez were forced to grapple with the recognition they received for a contribution they had not made, while also acknowledging their own role in creating an environment where such a dramatic demonstration became necessary. The experience prompted all three to examine their own assumptions and practices, leading to meaningful changes in how they approached charitable work and community engagement. The weeks following the charity gala brought unexpected consequences and opportunities as Margaret's demonstration sparked widespread discussion about class, prejudice, and the nature of authentic charitable giving throughout the metropolitan area's philanthropic community. Local newspapers picked up the story of the mysterious million-dollar donor who had challenged assumptions about wealth and generosity, though Margaret's request for privacy meant that most coverage focused on the broader implications of the evening's events rather than her personal details or business achievements. The story resonated with readers who had experienced similar treatment based on their appearance or social status, creating a broader conversation about the importance of treating all people with dignity and respect. Margaret found herself inundated with requests for meetings and partnerships from charitable organizations that had previously been unaware of her philanthropic interests and capabilities, many of them eager to establish relationships with someone who had demonstrated both significant financial resources and a genuine commitment to effective charitable giving. She approached these opportunities carefully, using her newfound visibility to identify organizations that shared her values and demonstrated authentic commitment to their stated missions, rather than simply seeking high-profile donors for social recognition and networking purposes. The transformation in how Margaret was treated within the philanthropic community was both dramatic and revealing, highlighting how quickly attitudes could change when people's assumptions about wealth and status were corrected by undeniable evidence of financial capability. Organizations that had previously ignored her inquiries or treated her as insignificant now competed for her attention and support, demonstrating the shallow nature of much charitable networking while also providing Margaret with new opportunities to direct her giving toward causes that truly aligned with her values and goals for social impact. Margaret's experience at the charity gala had convinced her that anonymous giving, while personally satisfying, might not be the most effective approach to creating lasting change in how charitable organizations operated and how society approached questions of worth and dignity. She began to consider ways of using her visibility and resources to challenge systemic prejudices and assumptions while supporting organizations that demonstrated genuine commitment to inclusive and respectful treatment of all community members regardless of their background or appearance. The response from her own company, Innovate Tech Solutions, was overwhelmingly positive as employees and clients learned about Margaret's philanthropic activities and her commitment to using her success to benefit others in the community. Many staff members expressed pride in working for an organization led by someone who embodied the values of generosity and social responsibility, while clients appreciated the knowledge that their business relationships supported someone who was making meaningful contributions to important causes. Margaret's reputation within the technology industry was enhanced by the revelation of her charitable work, leading to new business opportunities and partnerships with organizations that shared her commitment to social impact. Margaret's relationship with her own family was significantly impacted by the publicity surrounding her charitable demonstration, as relatives who had been unaware of the extent of her business success and philanthropic activities suddenly found themselves connected to someone who had achieved considerable recognition for both professional accomplishment and generous giving. These family dynamics required careful navigation as Margaret worked to maintain appropriate boundaries while also using her newfound visibility to create opportunities for relatives who shared her values and work ethic to participate in meaningful projects and initiatives. The most meaningful outcome of Margaret's demonstration was the establishment of the Dignified Giving Foundation, a new organization dedicated to supporting charitable activities that prioritized respectful treatment of all participants while maximizing the impact of philanthropic contributions on the communities they served. Margaret used her experience at the charity gala as the foundation for developing new models of charitable giving that emphasized transparency, accountability, and inclusive treatment of donors and beneficiaries regardless of their social status or financial circumstances. The Foundation's first major initiative involved creating guidelines and training programs for charitable organizations seeking to create more inclusive and respectful fundraising events, addressing the systemic issues that had made Margaret's experience at the gala both possible and necessary. These programs emphasize the importance of treating all participants with equal dignity, while also providing practical strategies for identifying and nurturing relationships with potential donors who might not fit traditional expectations about wealth and philanthropy. Margaret's story became a powerful tool for education and advocacy as she began speaking at conferences and events about the importance of looking beyond superficial appearances to recognize the worth and potential contributions of all individuals. Her presentations combined personal narrative with practical advice about creating more inclusive charitable organizations, helping audiences understand how their own assumptions and prejudices might be limiting their effectiveness while causing unnecessary harm to people who shared their commitment to making a positive difference in the world. The ripple effects of Margaret's demonstration continued to expand throughout the philanthropic community as other donors began sharing their own stories of being underestimated or mistreated based on their appearance or background, creating a broader movement toward more respectful and inclusive charitable practices. These conversations revealed that Margaret's experience was far from unique, with many potential donors having been discouraged or alienated by organizations that prioritized social status and networking over genuine charitable impact and respectful treatment of all participants. Margaret's approach to follow-up giving became increasingly strategic and educational, as she used her donations to reward organizations that demonstrated genuine commitment to inclusive practices while withdrawing support from groups that continued to prioritize superficial status markers over meaningful charitable work. This approach created incentives for charitable organizations to examine and improve their own practices while also providing concrete examples of how philanthropic giving could be used to promote positive social change beyond the specific causes being supported. The personal satisfaction Margaret derived from her charitable demonstration extended far beyond the immediate vindication of proving wrong the people who had dismissed and condescended to her throughout the evening at the gala. She found deep meaning in using her resources and visibility to challenge systemic prejudices while creating new models for charitable giving that prioritized respect, dignity, and authentic impact over social networking and status display. 6 months after the charity gala that transformed her approach to philanthropy, Margaret reflected on the profound changes that had occurred in both her personal life and her understanding of how wealth and generosity could be used to create meaningful social change. The Dignified Giving Foundation had grown beyond her initial expectations, attracting support from other philanthropists who had experienced similar treatment, or who simply recognized the importance of creating more inclusive and respectful charitable organizations. The Foundation's programs had been implemented by dozens of charitable organizations throughout the region, leading to measurable improvements in how fundraising events were conducted and how potential donors were approached and treated. Margaret's decision to step forward from anonymity had initially felt like a significant personal risk, given her preference for privacy and her concerns about unwanted attention and social obligations. However, the positive impact of her visibility had convinced her that the temporary discomfort was worth the long-term benefits of being able to advocate more effectively for charitable practices that honored the dignity and worth of all participants. She had learned to balance her natural introversion with the public speaking and networking activities that were necessary for advancing the Foundation's mission and supporting organizations that shared her values. The most gratifying aspect of Margaret's new public role was the opportunity to mentor other successful individuals who wanted to engage in meaningful philanthropic activities, but who felt uncertain about how to navigate the complex social dynamics of charitable giving. She had discovered that many wealthy individuals shared her concerns about superficial networking and status-focused charitable activities, preferring to find ways of contributing to important causes without becoming entangled in the social obligations and competitive dynamics that often characterized high-profile philanthropic circles. Margaret's relationship with the original charity gala organizers had evolved into a productive partnership focused on transforming their annual event into a model for inclusive and respectful fundraising activities. Whitman, Chen, and Martinez had all embraced the opportunity to learn from their mistakes and to create new approaches that prioritize the charitable missions over social networking and status display. Their willingness to acknowledge their errors and work toward improvement had impressed Margaret and convinced her that genuine change was possible when people were willing to examine their assumptions and modify their behavior accordingly. The success of the reformed charity gala in its second year provided concrete evidence that charitable events could be both financially successful and respectfully inclusive, attracting a more diverse group of donors while maintaining the high level of fundraising that organizations needed to support their important work. The event featured new protocols for greeting and interacting with all guests, educational components that focused on the actual charitable work being supported, and recognition programs that honored contributions based on impact rather than amount or social status. Margaret's technology company had benefited significantly from the positive publicity surrounding her philanthropic activities, attracting new clients and employees who were drawn to an organization that embodied values of social responsibility and authentic success. She had been able to use this growth to expand her charitable giving while also creating new employment opportunities and contributing to economic development in her community. The integration of her business success with her philanthropic goals had created a model that other entrepreneurs were beginning to adopt and adapt for their own circumstances. The personal relationships Margaret had developed through her charitable work had enriched her life in ways she had not anticipated when she first decided to attend the charity gala that changed everything. She had formed genuine friendships with other philanthropists who shared her values and commitment to meaningful social impact, creating a support network that enhanced both her charitable effectiveness and her personal satisfaction. These relationships were built on shared values rather than social convenience, creating lasting connections that sustained Margaret's commitment to philanthropic work while providing the emotional support necessary for navigating the complex challenges of using wealth responsibly and effectively. The educational impact of Margaret's story had extended far beyond the immediate philanthropic community, as her experience was featured in business schools and leadership programs as a case study in authentic success and the importance of treating all individuals with dignity and respect. Students studying business ethics and social responsibility found powerful lessons in Margaret's journey from anonymous donor to visible advocate, learning how personal values could be integrated with professional success to create meaningful social impact while challenging systemic prejudices and assumptions. Margaret's influence on the technology industry had grown as she became a vocal advocate for using business success to address social issues and support community development, encouraging other entrepreneurs to consider the broader implications of their work and the opportunities they had to contribute to positive social change. Her speaking engagements at industry conferences and leadership events focused on the connection between authentic success and social responsibility, helping audiences understand how their professional achievements could be leveraged to create lasting benefits for society while maintaining profitability and growth. The transformation in Margaret's relationship with her own success had been perhaps the most significant personal outcome of her decision to step forward from anonymity and embrace a more visible role in philanthropic leadership. She had discovered that sharing her achievements and using them to benefit others provided deeper satisfaction than private accumulation of wealth or recognition, creating a sense of purpose that enhanced both her professional work and her personal fulfillment. The integration of her business success with her charitable goals had created a coherent life philosophy that guided her decisions and priorities. Margaret's approach to mentoring young entrepreneurs had become increasingly focused on helping them understand the opportunities and responsibilities that came with business success, encouraging them to consider how their work could contribute to positive social change while building profitable and sustainable enterprises. She had established scholarship programs and internship opportunities that provided practical experience in both business development and philanthropic strategy, helping the next generation of leaders understand the connection between authentic success and social responsibility. The ripple effects of Margaret's demonstration at the charity gala continued to expand as other philanthropists adopted similar approaches to challenging assumptions and promoting more inclusive charitable practices throughout their own communities. Her story had inspired a movement toward more thoughtful and respectful philanthropic engagement, with donors increasingly demanding that charitable organizations demonstrate genuine commitment to their stated missions rather than simply providing networking opportunities and social recognition for wealthy supporters. Margaret's personal transformation from anonymous donor to visible advocate had required significant adjustments in how she managed her time, energy, and public commitments. But the positive impact of her visibility had convinced her that the temporary discomfort was worth the long-term benefits of being able to advocate more effectively for causes and practices that aligned with her values. She had learned to balance her natural preference for privacy with the public engagement necessary for advancing important social causes and supporting organizations that shared her commitment to dignity and respect for all individuals. The establishment of annual awards recognizing charitable organizations that demonstrated exceptional commitment to inclusive and respectful practices had become one of the Dignified Giving Foundation's most successful initiatives, creating incentives for continuous improvement while providing concrete examples of best practices that other organizations could adopt and adapt for their own circumstances. These awards had attracted national attention and had begun to influence charitable practices far beyond Margaret's immediate geographic region. Margaret's story had ultimately become a powerful reminder that authentic generosity often comes from unexpected sources, and that the most meaningful charitable work focuses on dignity, respect, and genuine impact rather than social recognition or networking opportunities. Her journey from dismissed outsider to respected philanthropic leader demonstrated how personal experiences of prejudice and dismissal could be transformed into motivation for positive social change when combined with resources, determination, and a commitment to treating all people with the respect they deserved. The continuing evolution of Margaret's philanthropic work reflected her growing understanding of how individual actions could contribute to systemic change when approached with strategic thinking and authentic commitment to social justice. She had learned that challenging assumptions and prejudices required both personal courage and practical strategies for creating alternative models that demonstrated the effectiveness of more inclusive and respectful approaches to charitable giving and community engagement. As Margaret looked toward the future, she felt profound gratitude for the painful but transformative experience at the charity gala that had forced her to confront the limitations of anonymous giving and embrace a more visible role in advocating for the values she had always held dear. The evening that had begun with humiliation and dismissal had ultimately led to personal growth, meaningful relationships, and the creation of new models for philanthropic engagement that honored the dignity and worth of all participants while maximizing the positive impact of charitable contributions. The lesson that emerged from Margaret's story was both simple and profound. Authentic success was measured not by recognition or social status, but by the positive impact one created in the lives of others and the commitment to treating every person with dignity and respect, regardless of their appearance or circumstances. Her transformation from anonymous benefactor to visible advocate had demonstrated that sometimes the most powerful charitable act was not the donation itself, but the courage to challenge systems and assumptions that prevented charitable organizations from fulfilling their highest potential for creating positive change in the world. Margaret's legacy would ultimately be measured not only by the millions of dollars she contributed to important causes, but by the transformation she had sparked in how charitable organizations approached their work and how society understood the connection between authentic generosity and the fundamental dignity that every person deserved to receive in their interactions with others, regardless of their appearance, background, or perceived social status.